Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Wario Land. In the last part, we started off our adventures here in Sherbert Land, got a majority of the way through it actively, and now it's time for Course 16. So Course 16 is interesting because first off it starts off with a key outright, but there's a glitch that's present in several levels of the Game Boy version specifically that I have yet to cover, involving the world map in specific. Namely, you can actively skip some levels in the game due to how the game checks which direction you're pressing on the map and if there's a stage that way. Effectively, it's you pressing up or down and right at the same time. If there's a path above or below Wario, depending which direction you're pressing, and you press right, it'll read that you can move up or down, but it'll prioritize the movement to the right for some reason. And this allows you to skip level 1, the entirety of Mount Teapot on the overall world map and go over to Stove Canyon. It also allows you to skip this course to get to course 17, it allows you to skip course 21 to get to course 22, 23 to 24, 28 to 29, and 31 to 32. In specific, for the directions needed for those ones, to skip course 1, it's down and right. To skip Mount Teapot in general, it's down and right. Here in Sherbert Land's course 16, it's up and right. Over in Stove Canyon for course 21, it's up and right, course 23 is up and right, course 28 is up and right, and course 31 is down and right. Notably, they actively fixed this bug in the 3DS Virtual Console release because they ended up changing the priorities on the world map with the D-pad reading effectively, apparently. Suspicious little X in the background there. I wonder if something's there. Jump above the screen like it's World 1, 2, and we can only find a pretty good sized decent chunk of coins, but also our way to this level's alternate exit. That glitch is generally beneficial for getting through the game as quickly as possible. It's why basically every speedrun under non-major glitch categories will use it, to my knowledge. Except here in Sherbert Land, because it's the only time it doesn't actively help you skip a stage towards a boss fight, from my memory. Mind you, if you're doing a speedrun, you're not doing Mount Teapot or Sherbert Land unless you're doing a 100% run anyway, so Oh, also, just in case it's audible, I doubt it will be just given my mic settings. If you hear combat grunts in the background, I'm idling in a certain early 2024 large RPG release to grind for ability points. I doubt it's audible, but just in case. Out of all the stages in the game that have alternate exits, though, this one kind of sticks out in my brain because it's one of the few times the alternate exit is a lot earlier in the level than the normal exit. Usually the game likes to do sort of like the thing that Mario Land 1 did, even, where the alternate exit is either further into the level or right next to the normal exit in some form. Usually either directly above or below the main exit, or like a screen prior. This is the rare one that, in terms of just how you're going through the stage, it's technically like 3 or 4 screens beforehand, and that kind of just sticks with me for some reason. Mind you, if there's a place to do something like that that is a little bit against the norm of how the game handles it, it is, I guess, the overall optional world. Barring going for 100%. Thinking about it, though, in terms of how the 2 exited stages in this particular world wrap around one particular level, technically, this is probably the closest thing this game has to a forced evolution from Mario World, where you might accidentally lead yourself back around to an exit. It's nowhere near as doable as it was there. Heck, in Mario World, you can do it in 2 worlds, considering the Star World's existence, but you don't need to worry about that a lot here. This game's a lot more straightforward with its stuff. Which, honestly, might be, and I'll probably get into this again during the credits, that might partially be why Wario Land 2 Beyond went for the different mechanic set that became the standard for the series moving forward. Because this is pretty straightforward and almost in some regards indistinguishable from your average Mario platformer, barring the obvious different aesthetics and different main character. Them giving Wario his own series mechanics and identity was probably their way of trying to distinctify that more, and I can respect that, even if this is honestly probably my favorite in the series on at least a when I want to go revisit it angle. I guess technically some of the, like Wario Land 3 and 4 might be more mechanically interesting, but they also stress me out in ways that I do not appreciate. So with that, let's get back to talking about the game's staff. The next set of credits we haven't talked about yet is the game's graphic designers, so the sprite artists on top of the character designers and all that. However, there are 3 people listed, 2 of them are already kind of familiar. They are Takehiko Hosokawa and Hiroji Kiyotake, who were also the game's directors, so they clearly had a lot of influence in terms of how the game's styling looked, and honestly, they did a good job making some pretty interesting character designs, especially with the limited sprite size for the Game Boy. However, there is a third one listed, who is Kenichi Sugino. Similarly to a lot of the other staff we've talked about so far, they were on a lot of R&D 1's games. Virtual Boy staff on Tellero Boxer, special thanks in Super Metroid, Debugger for quality assurance in Metroid 2, but they were one of the main designers for Balloon Kid. They did some graphic stuff for Fire Emblem 3, as well as this and the Game Boy Color version of Balloon Kid. Nowadays, their most recent roles are a lot of supervising stuff, namely for Smash Bros. 4 and Ultimates. Next up, and this is the two I really find interesting, are the two composers listed for the game. First off, there's Kozue Ishikawa, who worked on the soundtrack for this, Link's Awakening, which also explains some of the similarities in the instruments used, as well as Earthbound and Wario Land 2 and 3, as well as being credited in I Wanna Be the Boshi, technically. Their most recent credit is an interesting one, though, in that it's apparently Star Fox 2, and the only reason that's recent is just due to the release debacle that went through that we talked about in that very LP. The second composer, though, is a very prolific one. It's Ryoji Yoshitomi. Their most recent credit is incredibly recent, albeit it's just in the special thanks section, as they're apparently thanked in Princess Peach Showtime's credits, which I think came out like a day or two ago at the time of this recording. They did some design stuff for the GameCube, Game Boy Advance era of WarioWare, but their most prolific stuff is in the soundtrack department, where they started apparently on Game Boy Wars, were then on Metroid 2, Mario Paint, Wario Land 3, Pokemon Puzzle League, Wario Land 4, Wii Fit and Play, Pikmin 3, Mario Maker, as well as several Mario spin-offs, including their most recent one outside of Princess Peach Showtime being Sparks of Hope, the Mario & Rabbids sequel, as well as the Mario RPG remake. Now, off the top of my head, I've only really been talking about the staff that worked on games outright, thanks to their Moby Games listings, for about a year or two now. The reason I actively started doing that is complicated, because for one thing, it allows me to fill out some blank voids if I don't have anything to talk about with the game in specific at the moment. But also, I think a lot of the time, there's a lot of talk about the games themselves, but seldom the minds that actively put it together and the creatives that helped really make them what they are. Because a lot of the times, it feels like, at the macro scale at least, people only care about the series, not who worked on it. When a lot of the time, there's a lot of people in common between a lot of notable projects at a certain company. Like, even as someone who likes a lot of the FFs after 10, it's hard to look at anything past 10 and go, yeah, no, this is the same team. Because largely, like, FF5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, while there was that one team split that was kind of like, are you left or right Final Fantasy minded, where this team worked on these 3 games, and this team worked on these 3 games. There were a lot of people still in common between them, where it was a lot of very talented people doing stuff at a very particular point in time. And I think there needs to be more recognition on that front. Because the games themselves are one thing, the creatives that make it are the real power there, though. A good example of this is, now I've not played a lot of this game, but Disco Elysium. That is a beloved, beloved title filled with so many creative characters and writing, and clearly a lot of very interesting art assets as well. But the main writers in specific were ousted from that company in the middle of the sequel's development, and effectively that studio is dead and being puppeteered. Which means the sequel, if it ever releases, which at this point I highly doubt it will, given news that's happened about that company otherwise since then, is gonna be bad, and nowhere near the same soul that the original one had, because it's not the same team anymore. So that's why I try to cover the staff now, especially in shorter LPs, where I have less time to talk about that stuff, because they matter just as much as the game's release, in my eyes, especially nowadays. Something I do like about this level, though, that's just kind of, oh, that's kind of dark but funny thing. I like how you can see some of the generic enemies frozen in the ice. And there's one of the few times you actually get to see the ice physics kind of messing with me. They're not too bad to deal with, like I said before, but there's moments where they get to shine. So, there is something kinda unique about the boss of this level, in that not only is the world optional, Technically, so is the boss. When we enter the room, there's a door you can enter to just completely skip the boss. Similarly, this is the only boss in the game, bar technically the final boss, you can fight multiple times on a singular save file. Which, that could be useful, because the penguin here isn't a lot to write home about. You jump on its head, it takes damage. It jumps into the water, it then grabs a shelmet, and then you just dash into it and get the leap again, and then you're good. This game's bosses aren't much to write home about. However, another thing that makes this boss a little unique is that once you defeat it, you don't get coins. Instead, it spawns 5 3-up hearts, so 15 lives for free from that. I think that happens every time you beat the boss off the top of my head. I've seldom gone back in to refight it, but since you can, I'm assuming it does, so not a bad way to grind lives. But since Sherbert Land is now good and wrapped up, it's time for us to head back to Stove Canyon and progress on with the actual stages we need to do in order to beat the game. The ice physics might, on a first playthrough, cause some problems in Sherbert Land, but it's far from my least favorite world. In fact, there's really only one world in this game I think is kind of annoying to deal with, and that's not until we're done with Stove Canyon. So I already said so before, but if you can't tell by the visuals, Stove Canyon is our fire level, so we're gonna have a lot of lava that's instant kill. In fact, they start off with that. The gimmick of course 20 is there's a giant wall of lava chasing you through most of it, so you need to constantly be on the run to outrun it. There are blocks you can break along the way and some coins to grab, and while you're obviously gonna need at least 10 coins to beat the stage, I tend to ignore a lot of the side stuff along the way just so I don't die. Chaser levels like this are some of my least favorites in platformers because sometimes the speed of the thing following you is just too high if you don't have ways to deal with it. I'm looking directly at you, Mega Man 11 Torchman. I love that stage, I love that Robot Master, but if I don't have that upgrade to the speed gear yet, that stage is a nightmare. Or if I don't have Tundra Man's ability for that matter. The fact they make you climb the ladders here is especially a little bit of a moment of, although it does allow you to use a little bit of a quirk with the game's collision. Technically, if a key that you're holding hits an enemy like that, it still counts as killing them with it like it's being thrown at them. I want to say that's because technically it might be a constantly active hitbox or something like that. Obviously, since there is a key, though, this stage does in fact have a treasure. And if you miss that key early on, you ain't getting it until you revisit the stage again, because here it is right here. Let's see, what do we got in this one? An orb! Yay? Mind you, I say you'd have to play the entire stage over again if you didn't get the key. That'd be true anyway, because we're effectively at the end of the stage as it is. Again, there's very few stages in this game that go longer than like 3 or 4 minutes if you're doing good about progressing constantly and not trying to jump all over the place looking for hidden blocks that might contain an extra heart or something like that. Also, if memory serves, to talk about how much time we're saving by speeding up the tallying and even the gambling. I want to say this particular part was 24 minutes long before I did that. That's about 5 minutes of me just standing there while the tallies go up and down. Now, if there is something that's pretty annoying about Stove Canyon that's pretty unique to it specifically, it is that there is a little bit of a tendency to rely more on a surprise beginner's trap type enemy in some of the levels here. I think the first one technically shows up in this level. But the best comparison I can make is, you know those enemies in Mega Man that dwell in bottomless pits and will jump up to surprise you? Yeah, there's some of those in the lava in, I think, technically this stage, and I want to say the one after this as well. So watch out for them and try to, like, lead your jumps a little bit to see if maybe you can bait one of them out in the case they're there. With that said, I think, unlike the ones in Mega Man, they don't jump out when you get too close. I think they're on a timer that's dependent on when you entered the stage. Otherwise, this level's particular mechanic is we got raising rock platforms that try to dip you into the lava, which is instant kill, so don't let it do that. Next up, though, let's get back to the game's staff really quick to talk about the next person credited. That would be Fujiko Nomura, who is credited as the package designer, so the box art artist. They did a lot of work along that line to begin with. They did the package for this, as well as Mario Land 2. They did that for Sin and Punishment 1 as well as they did some stuff for the manual in Starfy 1, a game I LP'd relatively recently. They had a couple of special thanks roles here and there, but otherwise they were mainly an artist for things like Mother 3, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon 1, Pokemon Battle Revolution, Pokemon Emerald, Fire Emblem 4 and 5. So clearly they had a lot of range under their work, which I like to see out of people like that. There's also the packaging designer, which I don't know what the difference is there, honestly, who is Yusuke Nakano, who is a whole lot of thanks and artist stuff. They were illustration for Ultimate, Triforce Heroes, Majora's Mask, Skyward Sword, Phantom Hourglass, Mario Party 3, Mario Golf, Mario Kart 64, Super Metroid. That makes them the one who made that box art, I believe, off the top of my head. But they also did some artwork for Virtual Boy Wario Land, Mario 64, Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, the Oracle duology. They did a lot of just physical and in-game art design stuff, like their character designer on the Oracle games in specific. They did some supervision for illustration on like Federation Force. They designed some of the stamps for Twilight Princess Wii U. They did some of the 3D map graphics for Super Robot Wars 30, which is their most recent credit. These are the enemies I was talking about, by the way, that are like the ones in Mega Man that just leap out when you get relatively close. Again, I think it's more based on a timer when they enter the screen, but they definitely time that around when you would be moving towards them anyway, so be careful. Something you can take advantage of in this level and a couple of others, though, is that ladders, the top of every single ladder in the game counts as a physical platform, so you can just stand and jump off of them should the need arise. But there's also not many cases where you can really use that to your advantage. There's a couple here and there. There's also notably a bug you can use, I believe specifically with Bull Wario, that allows you to climb a ladder while also ground pounding, so you can just carry forth and not have to worry about anything hitting you along the way, because you're probably going to kill it first. Which, hey, if you can get that to work, it's useful enough, I guess. Not something I would usually do myself, because I don't really like to be Bull Wario too often. I prefer to be Dragon or Jet to either move really fast very far or take care of enemies from a distance, but that's just my playstyle, really. The next level has a mechanic I find fun, but it's one you can largely ignore if you have the Jet Hat. The gimmick of Course 23 here is minecarts. You got tracks here, you jump on the minecart, it moves along them. You can use it as a platform, you can jump off of it a little late just so you don't fall into the lava, but you can also use it to extend your jump a little bit. But if you go out of your way to get a jet hat first, you can ignore a lot of this level. And that's just kind of the thing whenever you give a character an ability like the jet hat, as I brought up before comparing it to the cape feather. If you give people a way to fly and ignore level design, they're probably going to do it. Especially if they deem the level design in the level specific a pain in the ass. That there, I actually don't know the name of that particular, like, spring panel. But the one with the sun on it, you touch it, it sends you really high up. Those are only used in a couple levels in the game, but that allows you to reach the checkpoint for this level. But you may have noticed on the world map, this level was a concentric circle, so there's also a second exit here that requires you to use one of those blocks. And it's one of the few times you're probably not going to get a second exit on a first time, even if you know it's coming, because you'll be fighting your instincts. The way this particular hidden exit works is on the final minecart, you need to stay on it until right before it hits the lava in order to jump to the right, coming up right here. If you jump too early, you can't get the hidden exit. If you have the jet hat, you could theoretically go down there. I don't, and I don't think Wario can curve his jump that well. So we're just gonna go on and I'll come back in to get that in a moment. Mind you, once again, most of the levels in this game, their hidden exits are located near the original exits anyway, so you kinda gotta go through the entire level anyway. So I'm not sure how I'm gonna handle this in specific, but going back to the game's staff, and the ones that are listed in the credits, the main listed role we haven't talked about yet is Gunpei Yokoi as producer, but there's two other categories of people still in the credits: special thanks and game testers. Some of these people have quite a few things under their name, some don't. For instance, the first person in the special thanks is Graham Archer, who was a quality assurance tester on Resident Evil 2, as well as the GameCube Serious Sam. And then after that is Dave Brooks, who worked on the localization for Dragon Warrior 2 and is in special thanks for Mario World, this, as well as Mario Land 2 and Earthbound Beginnings. So likely either these people helped with a very specific facet that wasn't big enough to be an overall credit, or they were probably on the office side of things helping things get done on the business side. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 5, we're gonna finish off Stove Canyon before heading off to my least favorite world in the game. See you guys then.